I'll be speaking with Mazin Qumsiyeh, who is aboard one of the boats of the Gaza Freedom Flotilla. He teaches at Bethlehem University and is director of the Palestine Museum of Natural History. We speak just as news has arrived that Israeli forces have captured the boats on the high seas around 40 miles out from Gaza City. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on your show.
So what is the latest information?
So there are 3 boats and 36 people. The largest is Al-Awda, which is the boat that I was on briefly in Palermo and Napoli in Italy as we tried to drum up support to break the blockade on Gaza. We stayed in touch with the boats, daily and then hourly as they came close to Gaza. About 60 miles off of the Gaza coast, they were contacted by the Israeli Navy and warned, and then they were boarded and hijacked. And of course, Israeli Navy had blocked all signals, so there's no way to communicate with the people there. As usual, they probably hijacked their phones and their satellite signals and everything, so that there's no way to communicate with the people on the boat. So the organizers and all people like me and others who support this mission have called on the international community to intervene, to stop Israel from violating international law, and to release the passengers immediately and allow the delivery of medical supplies to Gaza.
Now, you are on Al-Awda, which means the return. Can you give some background about that phrase?
Yes, Al-Awda ship is an old fishing vessel, a motor vessel. The other 2 boats are sailboats. They were all purchased in North, in Sweden and in Norway, and through donations from activists. And those boats, which are modified shipping boats, basically brought medical supplies to Gaza, or tried to bring medical supplies to Gaza. But more importantly, it was about breaking the blockade, which is a blockade that lasted now nearly 12 years, that is causing a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Per United Nations, Gaza is unlivable, actually, today, as a result of this blockade that's illegal and inhumane.
But I wanted the term Al-Awda, the return in the Palestine.
Al-Awda means the return, and we have ships called Freedom also, because these are the principles that guide the Palestinian struggle. As you know, there are 13 million Palestinians in the world. 7.5 million of us are refugees or displaced people who are longing to return to their homes and lands.
Now, I believe on the Al-Awda there were pictures of eyes painted on the front of the boat. Who is that a picture of? Whose eyes?
I don't remember which picture. There are several pictures on the sides of the boat. They refer to local Palestinians and others who are involved in the struggle, including, we mentioned Tamimi at one point, and we are asking for freedom, ending the occupation, freeing Gaza from the blockade, and freeing all of Palestine from Israeli military occupation and its inhumane treatment of the native Palestinians.
So who was on the Al-Awda with you? Any Americans? Or?
So on Al-Awda boats during the trips within Europe to drum up support, there were people coming and going off the boat of various nationalities. Nearly 40 nationalities came and left the boat. On the final leg of the trip towards Gaza, there are 36 people that represent 17 nationalities or 16 nationalities: Swedish, Norwegian, Americans, even Israelis. And those people are of various backgrounds. people that want to protect Palestinian human rights, people like Sui Ang Chai, who was in Sabra and Shatila in 1982 and witnessed the massacres and treated some of the injured in Sabra and Shatila, and then went to Gaza and helped Palestinians. She's an orthopedic surgeon, works in London. So there are various people, various backgrounds who work for human rights, for justice.
Was among the participants, it mentioned Robert Nyman. Was he on the leg you were on, or?
Yes.
And I saw they also said that the leader of the boat, not the captain, but sort of, I guess, political leader, was an Israeli amputee. Is that right?
Yeah, Zohar Regev, who is an Israeli who lost her leg in an accident, was one of the key organizers, is one of the key organizers, and she's very passionate about human rights. Another Israeli who's on the boat is an Israeli, actually used to be working in the Israeli military, Yonatan Shapira, and he had, amazing stories to tell. All these participants, people can go to the website of the Freedom Flotilla, and they can see basically their stories and how they end up on those boats and all of that. It's amazing stories to watch and hear, how, for example, somebody who used to work in the Israeli military turned out to be on his fourth trip to try to break the blockade on Gaza.
I want to play devil's advocate for a minute. The Israeli Navy says these boats are violating international law. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, if we are violating international law, they should point out to what international law are they referring to, since Gaza was claimed to be not under Israeli occupation and not Israeli territory. And so if that is the case, what exactly is that we are violating? Israel is violating international law by blockading 2 million people. Most of them are refugees or displaced people living in this semi-arid region with limited water resources. Actually, Israel cut off the water on them and the electricity and so on. Actually, 97% of the water of Gaza is now undrinkable. It's basically poisonous water. To be used by 2 million people. 1 million of those 2 million people are children. So Israel is literally poisoning the children of Gaza, and the UN had said that Gaza's blockade is not legitimate by international law. Mm-hmm. So actually Israel is the one that's violating international law, not people trying to deliver medical aid to Palestinians. There's nothing that humanitarian aid is in any situation can be considered violations of international law.
Let me ask you, have you ever been to Gaza?
I was in Gaza earlier in the 1970s and early 80s, but not beyond that.
Yeah, and there's no way for you, a Palestinian from Beit Sahur, to get there.
Yeah, we are cooped up also in our own ghettos here, like Bethlehem ghetto and Ramallah ghetto and Jericho ghetto, and we're not allowed freedom of travel because we live under an apartheid law that was de facto apartheid for the past 70 years, and Israeli Knesset just made it de jure by instituting a law that says Israel is the, property of the Jewish people, so to speak, and that only Jews have a right to self-determination in this country.
Let me end with a hopeful note. Today, Ahed and Nariman Tamimi were released. I understand you know the family.
Yes, they are good friends of mine, and they just had a press conference, and it's very moving to watch these events unfold. Although, as I had pointed out, her brother is still in jail, and many other Palestinians are still in Israeli jails, including many children. Over 350 children are still in Israeli jail. Ahd herself was a teenager, as you know, 17 years old, spent 8 months in Israeli jail. So while she and her mother are glad to be out, they look forward to the day that all Palestinians are free and to the day that the occupation, colonial occupation of Palestine ends, and that we all have our freedom and live in dignity with each other.
Thank you very much for talking with me today.
Thank you.